the clouds over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. The earth, rocking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts.
Greetings and welcome back as always. Thank you all for joining me. At Global Climate Summit this week, U.S. isolation was on full display. Geopolitical heavyweights, including China, Russia, Japan, and Germany, they were there. Dozens of small island states, they were there. The world's poorest countries, including Chad and the Central African Republic, they were there. And Venezuela, Syria, Iran, they were there as well. The United States was absent. Brazil, China, and Spain exclude U.S. from UN Democracy Summit over recent conflicts. U.S. threatens to leave NATO after Europe recognized Palestine as a state. Is the U.S. isolating itself? And if so, what does this mean going forward? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. I want to quickly hit two headlines before we get to my guest. White House begins plan for mass firings if there's a government shutdown. Funding will run out next week if Congress does not act. The White House is preparing federal agencies for widespread layoffs if the government shuts down next week, leaving new uncertainty about what would close and what would stay open if funding runs out on October 1. The directive has shaken the federal workforce, which has already undergone sweeping layoffs this year under the U.S. DOGE service, and is now scrambling to understand who could lose their jobs as soon as Wednesday. Officials have yet to publish plans showing what agencies would close in a shutdown. Folks, this is very, very simple. The Democrats have taken a position that they are not going to approve the Republican funding legislation unless the Republicans agree to continue those that are getting tax cuts to pay their Obamacare and other health care to continue. And the president is now throwing down a serious challenge. And we're going to have to see how, if the Democrats are willing to stick to their guns and hold the Republicans accountable. The president is raising the stakes here. Not only will there be a government shutdown, but I'm going to fire a whole bunch of people and I'm going to blame it on the Democrats. That's the game plan here. Again, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, let's see how willing you all are to stick to your guns. The second one, Hegseth orders rare, urgent meeting of hundreds of generals and admirals. The Pentagon has summoned military officials from around the world for a gathering in Virginia. Even top generals and their staffs don't know the reason for the meeting. The highly unusual directive was sent to virtually all of the military's top commanders worldwide, according to more than a dozen sources. It was issued earlier this week against the backdrop of a potential government shutdown. And as Hegseth's overtly political moves have deepened a sense of distress among his opponents who fear he is erasing the Department of Defense's status as a nonpartisan institution. When someone as totally inept and unqualified as Hegseth makes a move like this, one can only wonder. Well, on today's episode, the issue before us is the United States isolating itself from the world? And if so, what could be the longer-term effects? My guest is a multidisciplinary artist, author, and independent journalist. Her diverse body of work, which includes a podcast and show on Pacifica Radio, 4 books, 2 digital media projects, and several other visual art exhibits. Ester Iverem, as always, Esther, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Wilmer. Thank you for inviting me.
Let me first, I got to right off the top, because she jumped on this real early today. Cherie, thank you so much for your super sticker. Cherie, thank you. Really appreciate that. And Carol Asbaram, Carol, thank you. And she says, keep up the good work and please more African news, especially South Africa and Burkina Faso. Carol, you got it. So with that, Esther, don't know how much, if any, of the president's presentation at the United Nations you spent time watching. But what we see here is something that I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime, and that is countries turning their backs totally on the United States, not inviting it to the Democracy Summit, the United States not showing up at the Climate Summit, the president threatening to leave NATO as more countries are now recognizing a Palestinian state. What signals, if any, does this send to you?
Well, Wilmer, I was fortunate not to really see the speech. There were a number of people who told me about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really avoiding it. I was avoiding it at all costs because the snippets I heard were not only embarrassing for the United States, but there was more fuel to fuel speculation about Trump's mental condition. All right. So I kind of relate this to what you're saying around the isolation, because what we saw was the performance of a bully,
Mm-hmm.
and the performance of Trump so far this time in office has been that of a bully. And so you kind of have to think about whether the bully cares about being isolated. You know, I don't think so. I don't think that he cares about being isolated. I think that when you talk about the US, you're really talking about the Trump administration, right? And so all those headlines you read about the climate summit, about the democracy summit, these are things that he doesn't care about because he still sees the US as the singular hegemon,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Even we know the world is changing a lot. He sees the US as this singular hegemon that can basically rule all by itself. We have gas, we have oil. We want to sell people our oil. We're not trying to stop climate change. We're not trying to move to renewable energy. He just stopped a wind power project that was nearly complete, almost just out of spite, because there's no reason why the wind power project could have gone forward. So in all those areas that you're talking about, democracy and moving to make our energy more sustainable, he has no interest in that whatsoever.
taking it a step further, beyond Donald Trump, and looking more at the longer term, or hopefully not shorter term, impacts of his just utter incompetence. If this really escalates in Ukraine, more than Donald Trump is going to be affected. If this escalates beyond China, more than Trump is going to be affected. What he's trying to do in the global South, Hegseth calling all these generals to Virginia. If the impact were limited or restricted to Donald Trump, then I say, hey, man, take it as far down the rabbit hole as you want to, because, you'll find out. But what I don't want is for us to find out. Esther.
Yeah, well, we will definitely find out. When you really look at the how he has basically treated the American people, you can even say that the Trump administration is isolating itself from its own people, that it is attacking its own people. It's attacking the United States people. Look at the federal workers. You talked about him threatening to have mass layoffs if the Democrats succeed if there's a government shutdown. And, I know you're here in this DC area, but not only in the DC area, but around the country, because there are federal workers spread out across the country, we've seen a tremendous impact on people. So he is not really thinking about the impact on Americans. Look at the tariffs, still clowning people with this idea that these other countries are paying the tariffs, but it's the American consumer paying the tariffs, right? So whenever you talk about Trump, you have to talk about who is advising him, who's giving him this information, right? And people say that he's very much influenced by the last person he spoke to. So just like he spoke to somebody who told him that Ukraine could win and that all they need is more weapons pumped in from Europe, just like somebody told him that climate change is a hoax and that, we can keep on burning oil and gas for as long as we can, and we don't need to work with the rest of the world to get off this fossil fuel habit. We're stuck in idiot land. I mean, I don't agree with the people who say, well, you should have voted for Kamala Harris because we were still stuck in this horrific genocide. But we are stuck in a situation where you have someone, the same person who was making that speech at the UN, running things and having this immense power. We don't know. Of course, the American people are going to be impacted, and we have to muster all the resistance we can to fight this regime, because it's, like I said, it's also harming us. It's also coming after us.
To those that say, oh, well, see, if you had voted for Kamala, we wouldn't have this problem. My first question to them is, name 3 policies that she articulated during the campaign,
right,
that would give me any indication to believe that she was even thinking about anything.
Right.
Other than she's not going to change policies from the previous Biden administration.
Right.
Which tells me we by now, and there are others who would agree with this, be in nuclear war with Russia because she was going to force the issue on Ukraine. Now I don't hear anybody in the public articulating that, but that's what the math tells me. What say you, Esther?
Well, obviously, those of us who were following the story and not following it according to what the mainstream media wanted to say about Trump being a Russian asset and him being in bed with Putin and all this other stuff, we understood very much that as they continue to press the issue up against Russia's border, if they continue to up the ante, with new weapon system after new weapon system after new weapon system, that it was only leading to one way. And unlike some of the pundits who felt like Putin was bluffing, I think that none of us felt like he was bluffing, because this is an existential issue for Russia. We're on their border. They're not on our border. And they're very clear that they're not going to have this nuclear armed state on their border, this kind of playground and launching pad for NATO to fire missiles into their country. You see that ever since Trump kind of, I guess, gave them free reign a few days ago, they've been firing drones, into Moscow or into Russia. So this is what they refuse to have. And they are very clear that, every time the Ukrainians do what they're doing, it's very clear that they need to stick with the plan, that they need to keep the war. They have to simply, keep the war going and deal with the threat as best they can, because NATO and the US are not going to be real partners in ending the conflict.
And to those, I also ask that, well, look back at the Cuban Missile Crisis. And if the United States was justified, and I'm not saying that it was, but to those many that believe it was, if the United States was justified in its response in the Cuban Missile Crisis, then why should we hold any other country to a different standard?
Right.
When I ask that question, I hear a lot of crickets. I don't get a lot. Well, because as we are here connecting the dots, a lot of folks fail to connect those historic events.
Yeah, absolutely. So even people who know better, as I would say, people who should know better, they're not young. They were around during the Cuban Missile Crisis. They know that the way that crisis is even painted now, as if, Kennedy was this tough guy who stuck to his guns and, he made Russia back down. We know better now. We know that it was a lot more involved than that. We know that there were negotiations behind the scenes, that we had to remove missiles from Turkey that were pointing at Russia. So there was a lot going on then. But the crux of the matter is that the U.S. was not going to allow missiles on our border, and Russia's not going to allow it either. I'm not really sure why people are, they just hit the silly button when it comes to Russia. They don't have a way of understanding Russia as a part of the community of nations that has the same rights to self-defense, the same rights to what they've been talking about from the beginning, their own security guarantees. So Ukraine doesn't get to have security guarantees at the expense of Russia, neither does Europe. And people just can't seem to accept that Russia deserves its security.
Well, so Esther, that takes us into a point that you were very clear with me that you wanted to talk about, and that is the media.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of I would take what you've just said and say a lot of what you're describing has to do with the fact that, first of all, the mainstream media does not provide the American public with the type and level of analysis that is necessary for them to make valid, accurate assessments of reality. It amazes me when I go to other countries how well informed people are. How, and you don't, and you can just talk to average people on the street, and it's amazing how well informed other people in Europe, other people in the Middle East are in terms of world events. And so the responsibility of the media, and I'm not even talking about people doing their own reading and digging and finding for themselves, but if you just sit and watch MSNBC, if you just sit and watch CNN, you are going to be sadly disinformed. And I say disinformed, not misinformed, because they are intentionally misleading you.
Yeah, and it may get worse, because we have a situation now where you have far right or Zionist controlled entities trying to take over more of our media space. So I think about the purchases you already know about Elon Musk owning X, but you're talking about the potential purchase of TikTok, and the algorithms of TikTok being changed for the US, only for the US, and these buyers that are buying the platform impacting the US. Other purchases of CBS, and that potential buyer talking about appointing Barry Weiss, arch Zionist, to be the head of CBS News. You're talking about the recent coercion by the FCC chair to have Jimmy Kimmel fired. Now, due to public pressure, Jimmy Kimmel was put back on the air, but you have these two major affiliate partners for CBS, Sinclair and Nexstar, still withholding his show from 70% of the market. I think the figure is. So these are very disturbing developments for what we want to call the free press, the our ability to have a First Amendment that actually matters. So I think that these are things that really I'm looking at, and those of us in the independent media space have even more work to do, and to correct the record when we can, to keep putting out more information. And the thing is, our platforms are becoming even more important, because if you look at even the coverage of Charlie Kirk's murder, it's only through the independent media that we're getting the real coverage about what was happening there behind the scenes, right? What really led up to this, horrific murder, right? I'm not condoning any murder, but this is a really important story in terms of media, what story gets out, how Trump is using this murder to further clamp down on dissent, critics of him, him saying that, criticism of him must be illegal, right? You have Hegseth telling reporters that they're going to have to take a pledge to report, to have press credentials to report at the Pentagon, to basically report on what is the biggest government agency we have. They get the overwhelming lion's share of our public dollars. But now reporters are being told that, in order for us to, for you to report on, you have to have clearance to report on anything from the Pentagon. And if you don't want to sign this pledge, and you will be banned. Basically, you won't have credentials. And if you report on something that we don't like, we may deem you a security risk. This is really getting beyond Orwellian.
So so beyond Orwellian, you're absolutely right. Lee Ricks here has a couple of comments, and I'm not quite sure, Lee, what you're responding to. So what we have now is better. If that comment is in response to what I said, please be very clear. I was not making a value judgment when I talked about the difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. That was not a value judgment. That was merely a statement of fact. So I'm not quite sure. And then you say false equivalence. That leads me to think that you're referring to my trying to compare Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. That's not a false equivalence. Those were the two options. And there are many who say that looking at the circumstance we're in and saying we wouldn't be in this circumstance if we had voted for Kamala Harris. Well, you're right, those people that think so. We wouldn't be in this circumstance. We'd be in a different circumstance. And who's to say that that different circumstance would be a better circumstance? Again, nuclear war with Russia, I don't see that as being a very good alternative. Esther.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not going to win any of those kinds of arguments because people are really looking at their circumstances right here. The attack that Trump has made on the American people. And the thing about the Democrats is that in order to keep more of the public on their side, the federal workers, certainly the public workforce, they knew better than to fire people en masse, to basically restructure and tear apart the government as we know it. That was never on their playbook because they were using all those levers of government for their own means too. So people who are suffering here at home can't really think about the fact that the way that the Biden administration was going in terms of attacking Russia would perhaps lead to a different kind of attack here at home. Okay, let's put it that way. All right, and maybe you wouldn't be fired, but maybe you would be staring at a different type of calamity here at home.
So, getting back to the media conversation, when we look at the direction that this Charlie Kirk assassination has gone, and you mentioned Jimmy Kimmel, when you talk about now what Hegseth is saying to the DOD,
DOW.
Say again.
DOW. It is.
Oh, thank you, Department of War. Thank you very much. You are at the Department of War.
Yeah.
In fact, you know what? Let me switch that. Let me change my question. I'm glad you said that, because with this issue of Hegseth ordering hundreds of generals and admirals to Virginia, this highly unusual directive, and changing the name of the department to the Department of War, that's a fairly ominous indicator, Esther.
Sure is. And I think that when people were not, the countries were not inviting the U.S. to the Democracy Summit, it had a lot to do with the provocations against Venezuela and the real danger that we are posing to countries right here in our hemisphere when we deploy, a flotilla of battleships and other types of war making, ships to near the Venezuela coast. What we're saying is that we're doing more than threatening. We are kind of preparing for something. And we would think that the U.S. wouldn't be as naive to actually go to war on Venezuela. But when you have this type of directive to generals, when you have this type of posturing, provocation, you have to think that these people are unhinged enough to actually do that. So I think that's why we weren't invited. And I say we in terms of the US. And I think that's why people in this hemisphere are keeping their distance. I mean, I think that in what we've shown in terms of continuing to support the genocide in Gaza, attacking Iran, blowing up 3 boatloads of innocent fishermen or migrants or whatever they weren't drug dealers, that's for sure. We're showing an unhinged quality to our I don't know if you just the way that we're dealing with the world. It's not in a way that in any way reflects diplomacy. We already talked about that speech at the UN. I mean, what was that? So
it was a mess.
Yeah, a hot mess, right? Hot mess.
It was a dumpster fire. It was. So mentioning Gaza, France, the UK, and others are recognizing Palestinian statehood. And then with that, you even have more UN members supporting the creation of a Palestinian state. And now Spain is joining Italy in sending a warship to assist the Gaza aid flotilla after this Israeli attack. So there is, I can't even say seems to be, there is more assertive action being taken by European countries. And I think if we were to have looked at this, I'll even say 6 months ago, I don't think we would have expected to see Italy and Spain militarily confronting Israel in the Mediterranean.
Absolutely. And, the fact that those ships were sent, and, just before I came on with you, I saw that Maloney has asked the ships to give aid, to give off the aid, release the aid so that it can be delivered separately. I mean, I guess give the aid to Israel, like don't go any further or something like that. So I don't, I'm not sure what's going to happen with that particular ship, but the determination of the people who even went on this flotilla, right? The determination of the people to make their vote in the UN, the people who have defied the US pressure to go ahead and say, no, we do recognize the Palestinian, that means something. Now, whether this will go as far as a uniting for peace resolution in the UN that actually has teeth, that's what we have to figure out now.
Because I don't know how that happens with the United States with veto power in terms of the Security Council.
Well, their veto is actually what might make it happen, because people realize that the Security Council is not going to do anything, and the Uniting for Peace resolution is something that happens in the General Assembly.
Okay.
So it can proceed and override basically this veto,
right?
This terrible veto that keeps happening. And I talked to Sam Husseini of accuracy.org over the weekend, and he mentioned how these resolutions in a way can be used to harm the Palestinian people, because if these resolutions are passing, I mean, if this recognition is happening without the genocide stopping, like what good is it, right? People are really like asking that question. But on top of that, the issue, becomes what kind of state is being recognized? It's a state that is broken apart, occupied by Israel, and we don't want to just recognize the status quo,
Well, and I've had these conversations with Laith Marouf, and those are some of the very things that we have discussed. The fact and I think the controlling element over everything you just said is the recognition of Palestinian statehood is running through Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestine Authority, which basically means you're running you're running anti-fire legislation through an arsonist. So I mean, there are a number of factors and realities to all of this that definitely have you question the validity and the worth of the action All of that is true and valid. But I'll say again, we never would have thought 6 months ago that
Right.
you'd have 5 or 6 European countries at the UN recognizing a Palestinian state and confronting Israel in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to credit the people in those countries. I mean, Italy, there was just, I don't know, that looked like the Million Man March or the 2 Million Man March on the streets of Italy the other day. And so it's the people in all these countries that have brought the pressure, right, to do something. And we can see if this report I heard is true, that Maloney is kind of trying to give with one hand and take away with the other. So the people in Europe, in the UK, how many people have been arrested now in the UK? Like, just because they support Palestine action, right? They are willingly every weekend going to be arrested. And so I must say thousands of people at this point, right? So if you look at the UK, you look at France, I mean, look, it seems like France, they're about to burn that country down. It's between Palestine and Macron. I don't know, sometimes it feels like we are like on the precipice of another French Revolution, right? People are talking about let's find a guillotine. So this is just an outgrowth of the tremendous global mass movement for Palestine over the past 2 years. And whenever we all get discouraged because the genocide is ongoing and it's just getting worse, we all have to say, wow, we are making a difference. The Quinnipiac poll recently about, most Americans, want to stop sending arms to Israel.
Right.
They want to stop sending arms to Israel. They want to stop giving them all the weapons that are used to commit this genocide. And that's a sea change. You're talking about a sea change. I got into a kind of a back and forth with a follower of more of a legal minded person who was just also arguing how this recognition doesn't mean anything, and how in a way the even Americans wanting to also recognize a Palestinian state doesn't mean anything. But I was making the point about propaganda. I said that's the legal argument, but in terms of the US being the most propagandized population when it comes to Israel, the fact that most Americans now say, number one, we want a Palestinian state. Number two, stop sending our tax dollars to arm this genocide. We don't want that, right? That's major. And it may not be a legal argument, it may not stand up for what needs to happen legally, but in terms of people power and people understanding what's really happening in Gaza, in Palestine, it makes a really big difference.
And other polling numbers, for as bad as Donald Trump's numbers are, the Democrats' numbers are worse.
Right.
And one of the issues contributing to that is Palestine.
Right.
And so that to me is another data point to support the position that you just articulated. Getting back to the Charlie Kirk, and how concerned are you as a journalist about the First Amendment? And let me also throw into that the Fifth Amendment and the Due Process Clause, because the president is doing an awful lot as it relates to, Letitia James is a criminal. Well, no evidence has been presented to support that argument.
Yeah.
But he wants to label her as such without due process. This whole thing about immigrants and trying to send these immigrants, they're criminals. Well, we don't know that because there's no due process. And illegally entering the United States is a misdemeanor. It's not a felony.
Right.
So, Esther.
Well, the Posse Comitatus Act has
Right.
been just basically ripped up. Trump has been able to, there are loopholes in that law that keep, uh, I'm just using this as an example, that keep the that kind of maintain the rule that the U.S. military is not supposed to be on our streets, right?
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. military is not supposed to be deployed against Americans, but he uses loopholes in that law to basically declare any issue around immigration or any protest
Mm-hmm.
as an emergency, right? So, that law, for example, gives the government the right to deploy the army or whatever armed forces in an emergency. So Trump just says, well, okay, this immigration, this is an emergency, or these people out protesting against me, that's an emergency, right? So similarly, the whole First Amendment and Fifth Amendment are being, ground under the bus. Okay. So and he's starting with the immigrants, and he's starting with homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody is supposed to be have due process. All right. So he criminalizes immigrants and then denies them due process. What is it when you snatch people off the street with mask agents, throw them in prison? Sometimes you're abducting them as they're going to their lawful hearing, their normal check-in for their immigration status. These are poor people who haven't done anything wrong, and you're using that as a lure to grab them and put them in detainment, to detain them. And we have to look at the fact that these so-called detention centers are just money makers, right? So it's not just deportation. They're just holding people, and these private prisons are making, mad loot on this whole so-called deportation machine, right? So I think when it comes to journalists, we have to be steadfast about asserting our right to report the news. And despite his threats around criticism, you can't criticize me. Criticism of me is illegal. That's crazy, right? And also, with the help of people who are legal experts in due process, stick to those rights and don't forfeit them, just like ABC and CBS forfeited their rights in terms of giving in to his blackmail around these lawsuits. Unfortunately, we have people who aren't journalists and who aren't friends of journalism kind of making our business bad, as they say.
It's an extortion racket.
Yeah, against universities, against media. I mean, it's like a shakedown. It's like,
it's just
like
straight extortion.
It's
and what it now I understand the dynamics, for example, with the law firms that he extorted.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them represent clients that have business with the government. And so they have to sit back and do the business calculation. Do I fight this guy and jeopardize the status of my clients, or jeopardize my ability to represent my clients, or do I pay him? The whole ABC issue with Jimmy Kimmel. There are, as you mentioned this, there are a number of consolidation efforts and other types of transactions that have to be cleared by the FCC.
Right.
So is ABC going to be willing to take the hit and challenge the FCC and then not have their consolidations go through? I mean,
right. What a terrible.
Bezos is doing this documentary on Trump's wife and paid her something like $30 million.
Wow.
to do this.
Wow.
to do this?
You're telling me
I'm like,
something new. That's crazy.
who cares about her? That's the first question.
Yeah.
Are you, Ester Iverem, are you going to sit down and for 60 or 90 minutes and look at a documentary about her?
No.
I didn't think so.
No.
It's
Yeah.
it's an extortion racket. And what did the head of the FCC say? We can do it this hard way. We can do
Exactly. Yeah. That sounds like a mob boss, right? That's what that sounds like. Or your daddy, we can do this the easy way and the hard way.
Now that when my father would say that wasn't extortion. That
was a promise.
That was real.
It was a promise.
That was real. But so it is. It's just. In fact, I'm trying to remember now because Trump just said this yesterday or the day before about how. So when ABC brings back Jimmy Kimmel, Trump says again, this might wind up costing you a whole lot more money.
Right. This is so it also lets you know that with him in many cases, not just this Jimmy Kimmel case, that people who have basically given in to Trump, nothing good has come of it. I mean, Colombia gave in to him and he still came back and basically wanted more. The people who have fought back, at least they had their integrity intact. And maybe maybe Trump will keep going, but you could see, like, giving that example of Colombia versus how Harvard handled it, because it kind of veered into the realm of international and foreign affairs, because he was trying to threaten to revoke the visas of Chinese students, right? And it would really impact Harvard. But because he can't really afford to alienate China and those rare minerals he wants, he had to back off that, right? So I think this is all about power. Unfortunately, it's really showing us that he only responds to power. He's not responding to the good of humanity, certainly the welfare of the American people. He's not responding to the welfare of the climate, and can we have a sustainable environment for all of us? He is responding to power. And so maybe that's what we'll see in the coming days, as they actually perhaps are considering some attacks in South America, Central America. We'll see. If he thinks that he can get away with it, he thinks that he will not be scathed, or he can get the better of Venezuela or who else, then, that's what he's responding to. And that's what we have to worry about.
That is definitely what we have to worry about. And Carol Asbarom, thank you again for another super sticker. France is burning because of its poorly run economy and its inability to cheat 3 African countries out of their resources. Right. Carol, you are absolutely right. And to the poorly run economy point, it's the imposition of these neoliberal policies that we're seeing in Germany, that we're seeing in Britain, that we're seeing in Italy and Greece, that we're seeing in the United States. Part of the issue here is folks in the United States just haven't gotten hip to the game like a lot of the folks in France. Esther.
Right. Well, there are people who are catching up, perhaps. We are still in the streets. I know you saw some of the protests here in D.C. around the occupation of the National Guard that is still going on, the willingness of people to confront, ICE officers that are, mistreating our neighbors, abducting our neighbors. I do think that there are people who are standing up. It may not be on the level that we need, but I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged that 2 years in, people are still marching for Palestine. They're going to be in New York in mass on Friday when Netanyahu, I think, I don't know if he's speaking or they're just protesting. Kind of, it's a arrest Netanyahu protests, okay?
Right.
And that kind of militancy and a willingness to speak against what is stated U.S. policy to support this genocidal apartheid regime is really important. And we can't give up that right. We can't be scared, and stop marching and stop talking and speaking the truth.
Kevin Baptiste. So, Sister Esther, how far do you think this fascism will go? Seems like the sky is the limit. Thank you, Kevin.
Well, I think that it's as far as we let it go. The willingness of people to stand up to the Trump regime, to fight back. A lot of that fight back has to happen in the courts. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court has given Trump kind of a green light for a lot of these fascistic policies. There doesn't seem to be a policy that Trump does that the Supreme Court doesn't like. They are getting away with a lot on their shadow docket, not really writing real opinions, but just kind of saying, well, we're going to let this go right now. We're going to let him do what he wants to do. Maybe we'll get back to it later and consider the merits of it. But in the meantime, he's able to do what he wants to do. So I'm not one to bank everything on elections, but I think that the Democrats, as weak as they are, they may prevail in the midterms, which will take away a lot of what he wants to do. He won't have a rubber stamp in Congress, right? The win by Raul Grijalva's daughter in that election has just given them the vote they need to push through to release these Epstein files. And that's really important because some people believe that a lot of what we're facing is very much tied to this whole Epstein affair, that all these really deadly and destructive sideshows are an effort to keep people from demanding that those files be released, because we know Trump is in the files. And we also know that the FBI and the DOJ has been furiously redacting those files. So getting the raw files, perhaps from the estate or through some other means, will be really important. I hope I'm answering the question, but I just believe in the people. I believe that if we insist on our right to speak the truth, our right to due process, our rights to not have unreasonable search and seizure on ourselves, that, if we're willing to stand up, then, that will be the stop, and that will be the check on the Trump administration.
And let me highlight this point. The Supreme Court is allowing immigration and customs enforcement to arrest people based upon ethnicity, language spoken, job type, and where they might be found.
Right. Like, isn't that one of those places like a bus stop? Like if you're waiting,
or the parking lot of a Home Depot department store.
Right.
They are able, folks, this one's pretty simple. This one is you don't have to go to law school to understand the Fourth Amendment. It's pretty clear. The protections of the Fourth Amendment that prohibit you're supposed to be safe in your persons and in your domicile, and that there needs to be probable cause before you can be detained or searched.
Right.
And speaking English with an accent while standing at a bus stop shouldn't, and with brown skin, should not be probable cause to be detained by ICE. Esther, as we get out, let people know about your show, where they can hear you, where they can find you, where they can access the brilliance of Ester Iverem.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. So, our show is on Pacifica Radio, and there are about 30 stations that run the show. But you can also listen to the show on the website, onthegroundshow.org. We also have a podcast, and so we're on Spotify and other, Android, Apple, all the places that people listen to podcasts. And the name is On the Ground with Ester Iverem, and it's on the ground. There's a W for with and Ester Iverem, and also, I'm on different social media. If you follow me on Instagram, which is my name, ESTHER_Iverem, IVEREM, like Mary. I also post links to the show on my Instagram account.
And I'm on the show. And thank you very much, Esther. And it's a great show. And thank you. I strongly suggest those listening to tune in. Great analysis that Esther and her guests provide. Sandra Hearn, thank you very much for that super sticker. Greatly appreciate it. Esther, yes. It's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better.
Yes. Maybe that's right. But again, I believe in the people, and I've learned so much from the people in Gaza, and all I can say is if they can be steadfast through everything they've been through, it's changed my whole outlook on life and what I might be going through at any given time. So I know that's really a horrific comparison to have to make, but we are one human family, and so we have to make those comparisons and understand that if they are suffering, it impacts us as well.
And Jay asked, WPFW? Yes, Jay.
Oh,
WPFW, 89.3.
Yeah.
So Jay was making the point about he wasn't asking PFW. It was, why didn't you mention
yes. I'm not really sure of the audience here, so I didn't want to just focus on DC. But DC is WPFW 89.3 FM. In New York is WBAI, and that's I think 99.5. But people in New York, they know where WBAI is on the dial.
Ester Iverem, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it.
Yes.
Have a wonderful evening. Look forward to having you back.
Yes. Same here. Thank you.
All right, folks. Thank you all for joining me today. Thank you all for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast. Thank you, Esther. With me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. It'll be me and commentary tomorrow. Follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. Follow us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. And remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a blessed remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.